This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking the new movie, The Fall Guy, and what we thought about it. Plus, we're talking about Hal Steinbrenner's new comments about how the Yankees might not be sustainable after signing Soto. I don't know. That doesn't sound good. Let's hit it.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 21 of the Powell Not Found podcast here on Memorial Day weekend for those who celebrate Memorial Day. Hope everyone's grilling out. Hopefully everyone's with family and enjoying those 3 days off that we get from the office. So here on a Sunday, we don't get the day off here at the podcast, though. We are still rolling on, still talking about a couple things, and then I'm going to enjoy my vacation because I've got quite a bit of travel coming up in the next couple days. So I wanted to touch base with everybody, and before we get into our first topic of the day, which is kind of a pleasant surprise because I did not think that I would like this movie, and then ended up really enjoying it. I want to just remind everybody to subscribe to the YouTube channel that is at YouTube at powellnotfound, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. That's where most of the audio version of this podcast is put. I still have to kind of try to get it out to more platforms, and that is something that I will do probably when I get back from a little bit of this travel. But let's get straight into it. Let's talk about, and then I can go on vacation. So let's get straight into the new movie that, and I guess it's not so new. This is about the third week that it's been out, but took a chance, and after reviewing carefully all the different movie options that there were, took a chance and said, hey, you know what? Let's watch Fall Guy, The Fall Guy. A lot of publicity for this movie with Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling. A kind of interesting premiere publicity stunt as well. If you didn't know, this is a new movie that's basically a love letter to stuntmen everywhere. So at the premiere, they had like a choreographed fight breakout, and it was something that was kind of on Twitter if you were looking closely enough. But they did a media blitz for this movie to try to get people to go see it in theaters. I ended up seeing it on demand just because it was easier that way than going to a theater, trying to find the time, spending all that money. You know, I may or may not have a good enough time. I can pause it if I do it on demand. So there were a lot of advantages for on-demand viewing as opposed to just going to the theater. So decided to get it on demand, and I kind of love this movie. This movie is goofy, and it is just keeps on going. It reminds me of watching any kind of 80s action movie. I think that's exactly what they're trying to go for. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, we have the trailer up for you. Ryan Gosling plays a stuntman that goes through a terrible accident and is kind of in love with a camera operator who's played by Emily Blunt. And after about years being off the scene, he comes back to kind of rekindle his relationship with now director Emily Blunt, Emily Blunt's character Jody. And he is, basically doing the stunts for her in this new movie, but then gets caught up in a mystery to try to find the main character of the film. It is one of those films where you can watch it. You don't have to be that invested in the plot to kind of know what's going on. It still maintains this goofy sense of humor throughout. It feels self-aware when you watch this movie, that it's just really about the action. It's about the stunts that they do throughout the entire movie, and every single sequence. I mean, I really can't think of any sequence in the movie that doesn't have something like an amazing stunt that is first and foremost in the scene. It is like stuntman scene, stuntman scene, stuntman scene, stuntman scene, sprinkled in with a little bit of plot to keep you invested but it's really a visually spectacular movie. When I first started watching this, I didn't realize. I was like, surely this is kind of CGI, but I think you start realizing that most of these things are practical. And after doing a little bit of research, most of these stunts in this movie are practical effects, which make it even more compelling to kind of go back and rewatch it, because you're like, oh, this is real. This is not like a slight from like watching Marvel movies or superhero movies, but I feel like after a long amount of time watching those superhero movies, you kind of get bored watching visual effects, the same old kind of thing. They have like a similar visual feeling to them when you start seeing like heavy CGI. And this was kind of nice because this seemed to be filmed in a way that was like, no, we're going to make this in like with a Star Wars type mentality, early Star Wars, where there wasn't that much visual effects. There was just it was practical completely. Some of the stunts in this thing is amazing. I think the plot and the relationship between the two characters is just enough to keep it going. Hannah Waddingham, who you might know from Ted Lasso, plays the antagonist in this film, and she does a really great job kind of separating herself from that that character of Ted Lasso. They put a wig on her, which probably is or they dye her hair brown, which is probably a good choice. Otherwise, you'd constantly be thinking about her character from Ted Lasso, because she is so emblematic of that character. So they do a good job basically separating her from that in this film, but she does a good job kind of moving the plot forward a little bit and making it making it move when it needs to move, right? There's a lot of improv scenes. It appears, I have no proof that this exists, but it feels like they left a lot of what people would call play in this movie. They left a lot of improv moments and a lot of extra lines that probably weren't written in the script, and they leave those moments in, and it feels natural when you're hearing these characters talk. There's something about certain films and certain TV shows. I would even levy this criticism at Breaking Bad, that Breaking Bad, it felt like every line was so sculpted that there were times when it didn't necessarily feel like this is two people actually talking to each other, maybe in a very intense way, but it seemed like it was so finely crafted that every single if, what was purposely put there because it was written there, right? It's kind of like what Pacino says about doing Mammoth plays. Like, you don't leave out anything. You don't leave anything. You don't improv anything around Mammoth's dialogue. You just do it, right? This one felt like they kind of left a lot of room for not only the characters' personalities to come out, but probably Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt's characters to come kind of be a part of this movie and make it into something a little bit more well-rounded and natural. It's a nice breath of fresh air. I fear that it didn't do as well as it probably should have. It seems like it's underperformed a little bit at the box office, but this movie is really good. It's James Bond without the intensity of James Bond. It's Jason Bourne without the intensity of Jason Bourne. It is a comedy that is fully committed to making action sequences that are realistic and outrageous at the same time. It is an interesting, great movie to watch, and it's 2 hours, and it just flies by. There are some lulls in the middle, but it's quickly picked up by an action scene that just kind of takes you out of that slumber a little bit when it starts to kind of calm down. It's just constantly going. The fictional movie that they're making in this movie is what is the name of that movie? It's called Moon. Hold on, I have to double check this. Let's see here. Metal Storm. Metal Storm seems like it's a play off of Dune. I'm gonna assume. Emily Blunt's character, obviously a director for the first time, is trying to make a movie behind the scenes, and they make it as frenetic as possible. They make it as fast paced as possible. When you see her scenes, people are coming up to her like rapid fire, and it's always kind of interesting to see a movie depict behind the scenes of a movie, right? And this one's amped up to 1,000, but if it's any element of truth, if there's any element of truth to the way that they depicted it being a director, it seems like it might be a whirlwind of an experience, constantly making decisions left and right. This one, very interesting to see how they would film something like this. And it kind of reminded me a long time ago. I think it was Universal or Disney. Disney or Universal had an example of how they pulled off these stunts, and they put it on display. So you'd see, they would give a demonstration of how they would create these explosions. Now I'm sure, and how they do them in a safe manner, and especially recently, considering that we know that like there have been some really bad versions of this that have gone terribly wrong. Not to mention Rust. The shooting there, and then also I think Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows had a stuntman who was severely injured doing a stunt. So, but they were showing, when I was at Universal, they were showing basically a demonstration of how they do these things, and you really got to give it up to the people who do these things. And I think that's what this movie is doing, is a tribute to those guys that don't get nearly as much credit as the actors themselves that are acting the scenes, that are the front man of the movie. But these guys are putting, every single stunt, they're putting their life on the line, and they're doing it in a safe manner and going through it to make these things entertaining and to make them visually spectacular. This movie, according to Wikipedia, I guess had the Guinness World Record for most car rolls in a movie, which I think was like 8 or 9. So just for that alone, I would go see that movie. Go see this movie. But also to, go see it to support just how difficult some of these things are to visually create. As a cinematographer myself, I'd like, it's interesting to see how they capture these things and how big the rigs get. And you start kind of understanding more and more just how many people are needed to be there in order to make something like this come to life, right? Not only in your post-production, but in your production itself. I mean, some of the rigs that are attached to cars and these jibs that are coming out of vehicles, it's astonishing what they're accomplishing. And you see some of the visual majesty you can see it right now in the fake movie that they're building, because some of these sweeping cinematic shots are beautiful. But also, too, it's got to be a big work, a big lift to figure out before you start filming how you're going to capture this. Like, how are we going to capture this car scene and make sure we get every single shot the way that we want it? How do we optimize that time to make sure that we're not doing 900 takes, that we're only doing 9? I'm sure there's only a finite amount of time, or a finite amount of times you can put like a stuntman or put a production crew through something over and over again. That's why it's always interesting to see, for me, to see those behind the scenes moments of how they accomplish those things. There's a good one on Breaking Bad when the character of Gus Fring finally meets his end. You can see Vince Gilligan going through the stunt explosion a number of times and bringing it back, and you can kind of see the dolly that the camera's on. Those are the interesting things that I like to kind of look for and go, wow, how did they do that? And this movie, at the very end of the end credits, they roll basically basically a long video package of all the behind the scenes stunts in the movie, and that alone gives this movie a little bit more. It makes this movie bigger than. Makes this movie more impressive to me. That's what I'm trying to say. It makes this movie more impressive to me in the long run, seeing that all these things are practical. They didn't depend on computer graphics, and I think that's what makes this movie really, really cool. So again, if you get the opportunity, it's still in theaters right now, but you can get it on demand for $20. Go see The Fall Guy. It's a good movie. I think it's a rom-com that's trapped in an action movie, which it has a lot of energy and a lot of practical effects. It's a very, very cool, different type of cinematic experience. And frankly, right now, it's probably outside of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and the movie If, it's probably the best thing to see out there. So it's go support these movies because they'll make more of them if we support it with our wallet. So that is The Fall Guy, directed by David Leitch. It was out on May 3rd and in theaters right now. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk about Hal Steinbrenner basically saying that the Yankees are not sustainable, taking a little bit of a play from the Steve Cohen playbook. Let's talk about some baseball when we get back. Let's take a quick break. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Again, this is Mark Powell with the Powell Not Found podcast, episode 21 this Memorial Day weekend. We've got a couple different subjects. We just finished talking about The Fall Guy, the new movie I watched last night. I've been watching a lot of older things as of late, so it's been fun to watch something that was just hot off the press. I've been trying to fill up that backlog as best as I can. So I wanted to bring to everyone's attention before we kind of wrap up the show. Again, it's probably going to be a shorter show this week just because of the it's kind of the dog days of summer, so not many topics are jumping off the plate here. But let's talk about baseball and payroll. Everyone's favorite topic when it comes to sports. Because Hal Steinbrenner did kind of say that the Yankees payroll is not sustainable. This is coming from an Athletic article by Chris Kirschner. Basically, Hal Steinbrenner said his boilerplate statement again. He said, quote, "What I always say to you guys, like a broken record, I don't believe I should have to have a $300 million payroll to win a championship," and end quote. So Steinbrenner says this pretty much every single year, right? He laments the fact that they have to spend money in order to win a championship, right? Which always causes everybody to react a certain way. What does this mean for the future? Does this mean that they're not signing Soto, right? I think the Yankee fan base has had their fair share of contract talk, especially after not last year, but the year before, signing Judge was an entire baseball season's worth of rumor and speculation about where he was going to go. Was he going to go to the Giants? Was he going to go with the Yankees? Was he going to go someplace else? Is he going to go to the Phillies? It's the same mantra over and over and over again when it comes to these players signing. Do we have enough money to sustain to sign these players, right? The Yankees have a lot of players signed to big deals. You're talking about Garrett Cole signed to $36 million a year. You have Giancarlo Stanton, who's making 27. I think it says it in the article somewhere. Giancarlo Stanton, 32 million, right? You just signed Rodon. You have now Juan Soto, right? I mean, you're taking up a little bit of his payroll, even though you traded for him, but you took on his payroll, right? His payroll is not exactly something to sneeze at. And the next year, he's going to go on the market and he's going to make probably more than Judge, right? So the question is, can the Yankees hold on to Juan Soto while still holding on to multi-million-dollar contracts like Garrett Cole and like Giancarlo Stanton? Can they hold on to certain players, right? And of course, the answer is probably not in the long run. If you sign every single player to your 40-man roster to $40 million, you're going to run out of money at some point. It's not probably sustainable. There has to be a little bit of a balance. So does that mean they're not going to try to sign Soto? I think you would be naive to think that they wouldn't try to at least attempt to sign him, especially after the year that they're having. I mean, the Yankees are rolling right now, which is hard to get excited as a Yankees fan because the Yankees have done this a number of times. They've gone into June being the best team in baseball and they've fallen apart. They even last year they went into June, they were okay. They were pretty, they were, some games up on 500, right? They were like 4 or 5 games up. And then Judge broke his toe and boom, the season was over, right? Essentially from that moment on, they became non-competitive. So, but with his bat in the lineup, you can't help but notice how much different everyone looks at the plate. I mean, people want to hit. That is something that has not been seen in a Yankees uniform in a long time, right? I mean, he brings a confidence. He brings like every single, somebody said it on Twitter, every single pitch is cinema with Juan Soto, which I totally understood when I saw him with the Nationals, right? I didn't think he would be this dynamic of a player to change the entire outlook and outset of a team. Even when he was with the Nationals, when they won the World Series, I knew in a large part it was because of his presence, right? But there were other people on the team that really helped build and that helped bolster that lineup to a championship. You're talking about Zimmerman, you're talking about Strasburg, you're talking about Rendon, who's the Trey Turner, right? I mean, you're talking about people who can really add something to your lineup. So when Juan Soto came over here as essentially the addition along with Verdugo, right? Can't forget Verdugo. Right, I mean, he has completely changed that lineup, and when they all roll, it is a sight to see. The other day, a couple games ago against San Diego, Judge, Stanton, and Soto homering in the same inning. I think that's what everybody was waiting for. To be fair, I do think that Hal Steinbrenner should probably not be saying quotes like this because it kind of diminishes the confidence that they've built, right? We're playing for this year. We're not playing for next year, right? Looking long term was never the option to begin with. I mean, Soto was traded for 1 season. So there was no element of expectation keeping him because everyone knew he was going to go to free agency. So what's the point of this quote, right? What's the point of him being this transparent saying, hey, this is not sustainable. We can't sign everybody to $40 million. Is it prepping everybody for, we may not be in the market for Soto. We may not be able to hold this. Or we might not be able to really financially afford this going forward. To which I would say, but can't they? I mean, the Yankee brand is the most valuable brand probably ever. And that's coming from a biased Yankee fan, but the Yankee insignia is probably worth millions and millions of dollars in revenue. They probably bring millions and millions and millions of dollars in revenue just from ticket sales, from concession sales, from everything Yankee paraphernalia, from anything. So you'd think at some point, couldn't you do some sort of deal that would keep him in pinstripes for the rest of his career? I mean, you just saw a team like the Dodgers, who, again, big market team, not as big as the Yankees, but big, just signed Ohtani for $46 million and went clear over, they deferred a lot of that money, but they're going to pay it eventually. I mean, you couldn't think of the Yankees being that creative to kind of keep him in pinstripes, to keep this energy alive. It's going to be very, very complicated, too, if they win a World Series with this roster and then don't sign the guy that got him there. That's going to be the big question. I think this is a little bit of cat and mouse kind of. Why even say this? I don't understand what the purpose of this is. You're playing for this year. I can understand if you're saying this maybe after the season is over, and you know the outcome of what Soto brought to your team, and you know the outcome of what Soto brought to your playoff competitiveness. But I don't understand saying this in the middle of May. Who cares? Plus, I don't think it's that true. I think when you have the most valuable franchise in sports, I think you can afford to do things like that. It reeks of what Steve Cohen said the other day about the Mets not being sustainable. I mean, if you're a billionaire and you own the team and you don't want to spend, what's the point of owning the team? Maybe it's not viable. Maybe Verlander and Scherzer didn't work, but maybe giving that much money to two pitchers at the end of their career, maybe that was the mistake, not necessarily the amount of money you dished out to them. Because if you dished that money out to a 26-year-old and 27-year-old great phenom pitcher that bolstered your pitching staff and brought you to won you the pennant, they would probably be singing a different tune as opposed to the one that the Mets are pitching now, and now unwilling to spend and be competitive. I mean, essentially, they've written this season completely off. Even going as far as to say that Cohen was saying what a disappointment on their homestand, going losing 4 straight. I mean, you don't want to be in a position where you give the impression that you're not willing to spend for the player that's making your team better, and that was the cat and mouse game that they gave with Judge the entire time, that where they made him play the market, and until they finally at the very last minute came in, swooped in with a deal that was sweeter than the one that the Padres the Giants were giving him. So I just don't understand what the point of saying this, unless it's in complete response to constantly being badgered by, is Soto going? Have you been in talks with Soto's agent? Have you been in talk with Soto? Have talks began in the off season? And that's the response. That's the only caveat I'll give to Hal Steinbrenner saying this all the time, is that when the reporters give you the same questions all the time about whether you're going to, are you going to try to sign Soto, you can only revert to yes so many times before you say, hey, listen, I don't want to pay every single player $50 million, $60 million. You're going to price out, all of these small market teams from bringing anybody into their system if all the players get to a $45 million a year threshold, and that's the benefit. I think it's also worth mentioning, too, that while Juan Soto is incredible and he's a good player, he's going to be 27 when he's, becomes this free agent. And also, too, I mean, last year, the Boras clients didn't do that well. There's also going to be Pete Alonso on the block, right? There's other options for teams to not necessarily go that deep financially with a player. So, in essence, I mean, Juan Soto is boxing his opportunities by having his salary threshold go so high. He's boxing out his opportunity to play for other organizations that might be a good fit. It might be stupid to throw away that much money, but you're only talking about 10 teams that can afford close to $42 million a year, $50 million a year. What are you talking about? The Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Mets. the Rangers, Phillies, the Giants, and the Padres? Who else is willing to shell out that kind of money? It's certainly not going to be the A's, you know. And plus, you know, if the A's do sign Soto, then hell, man, I'm going to the first game at Sacramento. So, anyways, I just think it's a funny statement to have. Part of me kind of laments sports journalism a little bit because it does become a little bit repetitive after a while, especially when you're asking the owner the same question all the time. Like, are you signing this player? Of course they are. They're trying to sign the best team. But sometimes the best team is not necessarily the guys at the end of their free agency, sometimes the best players are not the players that are at their free agency period. You know, I think that was the question with Judge, right? Like, when you're signing Judge, he's going to be 30. You know, he came into the league late at 24, 25. You know, are you getting the best years of Judge after you sign him? No. The 9 years, I would wager probably 7 of those years are going to be great. The last 2 years might be something a little bit different, but I think that you calculate that into the contract a little bit. With Soto, it might be you're signing someone through his prime, so it might be a little bit of a different story, but still, you know, extended greatness for a long period of time, continuous greatness in a baseball player is rare, right? You see the best players eventually start to fall as they get older. So are you willing to take on $50 million a year for those last years of Soto? Who knows? But anyways, I figured this would be a good one. This is, again, an article from The Athletic that chronicled basically what the Yankees are going to do in this year, because this year is pretty much of a walk here for a lot of Yankee greats. You know, Glaber, if he's still with the team by trade deadline, you know, he's a free agent at the end of the year. He walks. I think Rizzo has an option to pick up. Cole has an option to pick up, but he can decline that option, but he'll probably pick it up anyways. So a lot of people this Yankee team might not look the same by next season, but we should, you know, if Soto's on the team, then you got to imagine other people will probably want to follow. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Hal Steinbrenner saying the Yankees payroll is not sustainable. Something about that didn't ring that true to me when I read it. But anyways, well, with that, I think I'm going to wrap up a little bit on this Memorial Day weekend. This is going to be a shorter episode, but I wanted to kind of review Fall Guy because I thought the movie was really, really interesting. And plus, I wanted to talk a little bit about baseball while the Yankees are doing very, very well. 4 in a row. And the offense is just booming right now, along with their pitching staff. Their pitching staff is remarkably consistent for a pitching staff that's missing their ace. You know, hopefully Cole comes back. We have DJ coming back from the IL pretty soon. It should fill in that gap. And that horrible, horrible Nick Birdy injury where he pulled his calf. That is a terrible injury from a guy who has pulled his calf. Clearly not playing professional baseball, but from walking around, I think I pulled it toasting some bread. That is a tough injury to come back from. It haunts you in a way where you don't expect it very much. Like, I've been trying to, you know, work out pretty consistently, and sometimes you'll feel it in the back there, kind of like not as strong, and sometimes it will just take a day. One day it will be great, the next day it will kind of stink. So getting a calf injury, that stinks, because that is just not that's not a fun one to nurse. Not that any injury is a fun one to nurse, but maybe tonsillitis because you're eating ice cream, but that one kind of stinks. So Nick Birdy out on the 10-day IL. Who knows when he's going to come back? Probably be a couple months for that calf to be fully ready. So that kind of stinks, considering that he was a utility guy that they picked up that would make the team a little bit different. And he was. When he started kind of heating up, he was a formidable bat in the lineup. So that's a tough loss for the Yankees. But with that, we'll wrap it up on this Memorial Day weekend. Again, I hope everyone is grilling out. I hope everyone is having a good time with family. And we will be back next week talking about the things that are much in the news and in the zeitgeist on the Powell Not Found podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and have a great holiday weekend. Bye.